But you can't do that. You can't just let those areas that you don't prefer them and just kind of like sweep them off in the corner and hope they won't ever get worse, because they will. It really has helped me to just be able to look at the whole picture of what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to progress. And it just really helps you have more peace and contentment to be able to take all those things and be more mindful about them. And I think that's really what God wants for us. Like, I think He wants us to have more peace and contentment.
Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. The fundraising season requires us to operate in both vision and execution. So you could say in the head, in the heart, and in the hands. In the Provisio curriculum, we highlight the importance of goal setting and organization in the process. But what grounds us and orients us as we are seeking to operate in these skills? We would submit that clarity comes through reflection, evaluation, and intentional planning. Our guest today has developed a resource that provides space for just that. Heather, would you like to introduce our guest?
I absolutely would. Yeah, this is actually a real honor for me because our guest today, I've known him for over a decade. So it's really exciting to have him on. His name is Dr. Jolly Johnson. And by day, he works occupationally as a dentist, but he has actually invested quite a bit of his time and resources over the years in discipleship, mentorship, and coaching. Jolly, we would love to pass the mic to you to just share with us a little about what that has looked like in your life.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. It's really fun to be on here with you guys today. It's really an honor. It's pretty cool to get to spend this time together. So I moved to Fort Collins in 2006 and started my dental business. And my wife and I did college ministry for about 5 or 6 years as we were starting our family. I've been a full-time dentist for almost 20 years now. And I guess a few years ago, I sold my business and transitioned to open a new business with my brother here in Fort Collins. And so I had a little bit of time off. I was using a planner at the time and started working on a resource that I would enjoy using more. That was kind of my primary motivation when we first started this. But that's a little bit about my wife and I, and we have 4 kids. And it's just an honor to be here with you guys today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess, I did fail to kind of connect why we wanted you specifically on the podcast today. But, Andy, as you said in our kind of the intro, really a big part of the fundraising season, and I would argue the adult life, is planning well, having vision, knowing what you need to do to execute that vision. And Jolly, as he mentioned, has provided a resource. So he created the Choice City Planner. We'll give you a link to that in the show notes, but you can find it on Amazon. And I came across this planner last year and started using it and just really loved it. And so thinking about someone that could speak well to this topic, we just thought that Jolly had so much wisdom to bring. And speaking of wisdom, he has actually also written some resources on Proverbs, which will probably come into our discussion today. But just to kind of close the loop. Yeah.
So you've crossed paths with fundraising more on the donor side, you'd say?
Yeah, I would. When my wife and I were doing college ministry, we basically used income from my dental office to fund the college ministry things that we did, including we did some big events and some basic day-to-day things and stuff like that. So I would donate to the church and then use the funds to do a lot of the ministry things that we coordinated.
Very cool.
Yeah, I remember Jolly expressing to me once that he would be on campus working with all these other people that were in campus ministry, and he was one of the only people that wasn't there in a support raising role, but was able to do that out of the flexibility that his occupation gave him, and was able to fund that ministry from again the resources his occupation gave him, which is cool.
It's great.
Yeah.
So, like we said, there's a lot that goes into fundraising, but a significant portion is just making sure that you are thoughtful and intentional. Your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed as far as your organization goes. You never want to initiate a conversation with somebody and then let them hang for, weeks or months at a time because you haven't followed up and you haven't been diligent in kind of keeping track of everybody. So I'm excited to hear more about your thoughts about organization.
Yeah.
But to begin, would you mind sharing a little bit about why you decided to do this, why you decided to write this Choice City Planner? And I'm curious about the name as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll just start off and kind of tell you the background and the story about how this all came about. So I was basically had just sold my business, and had thought I was going to take about 3 or 4 months off before I launched my new business with my brother. I was working about 45 minutes south of Fort Collins, and we were going to reopen a new office or open a new office here in town. And the location that we were going to open, we had it all locked in with the lease and different things, and that fell through. And so basically, I realized that my 3 or 4 month amount of time off was going to change quickly to like 6 months or maybe longer, which it did end up being actually more than 2 years.
Wow.
And so I kind of started saying, oh, I guess I'm on sabbatical for a while. And one of the days that I said that, this guy came up to me and said, well, if you're on sabbatical, have you ever considered getting a sabbatical coach? And I thought, oh, I didn't know they had sabbatical coaches. And he said, oh, yeah, by the way, I am one. And so I said, okay, great.
Unrelated. I happen to be one.
Yeah. And so he, anyway, long story short, I started meeting with him, and he said, wow, you would be really good as a coach. And I kind of, honestly, I didn't really have that much. I did a lot of discipling and mentoring and different things like that. But honestly, I was kind of more interested because as a dentist, I do a lot of, coaching and mentoring with my staff and different things like that. And so he kind of was talking about, he thought I would be a really good coach. And he was talking about the different programs that he had done. And when he talked about one coaching program, his eyes, like his face totally changed. And I've noticed that when as a dentist, I always watch people's body language, because if they're in pain, their hands will tense up,
yes.
or their face will look different, or different things like that. So I've really learned, because a lot of times people won't tell you the truth if they're hurting or different, if they're nervous or whatever.
I can take
else.
it.
But I can tell in their body language. So I noticed when he talked about this one coaching program, it was through Keith Webb, and it was called Creative Results Management. And he said, oh my gosh, this coaching program is like, I've been to like 30 of these, and this one's like hands down, like 10 times better than any of the rest of them.
Interesting.
And so I normally probably wouldn't have done it, but I had this time off. I just sold a business, so I had some extra money. And I also was looking for doing things to enrich myself or enrich my, I guess, management skills. And so I ended up going to this training. And at first I kind of thought it was kind of like I wasn't that impressed. And after like the second day, I was like totally blown away. And I was just like, my jaw almost hit the ground. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever been. Like, it was the best continuing education that I've ever been to. And so I was really, 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 I guess going into it, I wasn't that like sold on it.
Sure.
And after like coming away from that experience, I was really, I was about to start a dental business. So I wasn't going to like start a coaching business or something.
Yeah.
But I was really, I guess, profoundly influenced by kind of like the skills that they taught and the value of what they were teaching in that class.
I feel like we should link that in the show notes too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and basically what happened was I started reading this guy's blog and some different resources and things like that. And he was talking about, for coaches and for their clients, the value of using a planner.
Okay.
And so that was kind of, I had never really used a planner before that, but I kind of looked at the one that he was using and ordered it. And I thought, okay, well, this one's pretty good, I guess. But then just kind of being who I am, I decided to order like 8 other different planners just to look and see what they offered. So I did some research on the internet and looked at like what are the top planners that are selling in the United States. And I ordered all 8 of them and kind of started looking through the different ones. And then over time, I kind of, I've had a background in publishing different things before. Okay. And so I kind of started working on my own, basically just as a project to keep I enjoy projects like that.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying once that you ultimately designed this planner to like work exactly for what you wanted it to be for you. And then if it was helpful for others, that's great.
Yeah, I think in past projects, I thought I would design things for other people, but I realized that I don't have a very good pulse on what other people want. And so I kind of just decided in this project, I was like, honestly, I just want to create a resource that I will love using. And if it ever becomes useful for somebody else, then that's fine. But I just wanted to love having it myself. And so I took about 5 years and I just tweaked it a little bit at a time. And I would basically tweak it until I was ready to order another one and upload it and then order one for myself.
There you go.
So pretty cool.
Yeah. And the name, Choice City?
The Choice City Planner. So we live in Fort Collins, which is otherwise known as the Choice City. And I think it also has a significance for me because I feel like, especially in this day and time, we have so many choices and options available. And so really you have to narrow down, you have to make choices, and you have to choose what you're going to make a priority and what you're going to say, this is important, but it's not going to be my priority.
Sure. Yeah.
Prioritizing is a really good skill to hone.
That struck me the other day as I was trying to consider like what book to read next. I was just thinking,
choice.
Right. And I'm just thinking, I don't have an infinite amount of time. There are books that I cannot read. Even if I wanted to, I could not read every book that was out there. So I have to be really strategic. And I'm a slow reader. That doesn't help.
Can you tell us what you landed on?
Well, I think what I landed on was some of the books that were recommended to us on this podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. So one of them I read last year was Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome.
Josh Lindstrom. Right?
He recommended that. Yep. And then I'm in the middle of, or towards the end of, Spiritual Conflict that I believe either PG or Scott Moreau, Dr. Moreau recommended to us.
Okay.
So that's really good as well. Yeah. Eye-opening.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, as I said, I own this planner and I use this planner. And one of the things I actually wanted to talk about is in the very first pages, you have a dissonance exercise. I would love to hear from you. Why is that an important place to start?
And I would love to know what a dissonance exercise is.
Yeah, perfect. So a dissonance exercise is actually something that I created because I had a hard time actually being in touch with myself about what goals to set. I just didn't feel like I would think about it, and I just didn't know what I needed to do or what I needed to put on the top of the list. And even with a lot of the other planners, they would have like a list or like a place to list like 10 or even 15 goals. And I felt like after using a planner for a while, which I had never done prior to a few years ago when I started working on this planner, I just felt like that was totally overwhelming to have 15 goals.
Yeah.
And honestly, over time, so I first narrowed it down from 15 to 10, and then ultimately landed on, for most of the planners that they did, they had a 13-week time frame, which is about a quarter. So it's about a fourth of a year. And I honestly thought, if I'm going to do this and have a planner for a fourth of a year or for 3 months, then I think 3 is really all I could probably try to make progress on.
I was thinking 1. 1 sounds good.
Hey, yeah.
And so, but I think I kind of agree with you. I'd rather have 1 than 7.
Yeah.
But maybe 1, 2, or 3 is really all. If you can make progress or significant progress or complete a goal in 3 months, that's pretty good. If you can have one thing that you say, this is what I'm going to make my priority. So that was a big thing for me is I honestly, I would have all these goals, but then I would realize I didn't hardly make progress on any of them. So over time, then I basically said, I'm only going to put 3 goals down and I can list a few more if I want, but not at the expense of making progress on it, especially the number 1 goal. And then also probably the other 2, I think you could make progress on. So the dissonance exercise is something that I created to actually help me figure out what I wanted to put as one of my top 3. Because I couldn't really get impulse with that. And so what I did is first of all, I listed out all the things were going well in my life. So if my marriage was doing good, which I'm really fortunate. I have a great relationship with my wife. She's definitely my better half. And So it's pretty amazing that she puts up with me most of the time pretty well. And it's a delight to put up with her. But anyway, I would list out all the different things that were going well. And then I would take some time and say, okay, what things aren't going well? What are things where I could use some improvement, where, the edges, are becoming unraveled just a little bit, or maybe not all the wheels are falling off the bus, but maybe just an area where so it was kind of like a brainstorming exercise of what are all the areas that I could possibly work on. And then usually I would let that ruminate and sit for 3 or 4 days or a week or something like that. And over time, try to figure out how to make that into a prioritizing way to do goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I think that's a really good place to start. And I'm just trying to reflect a little bit about fundraising, even specifically, like, that's healthy, I think, to sit down every once in a while and say, like, what is working and what's not working in my process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and certainly these are all things to apply specifically to fundraising, but I think something we really try to bring home on this podcast is that, like, actually all the other things happening in your life that don't feel necessarily related to fundraising are going to come to bear on your fundraising. And so even, highlighting like the dissonance in, for example, my marriage doesn't really look like the way I would desire it to, or the time I'm able to give to, this project or whatever. So yeah,
that's good.
Or that you have kids and they're sick, or
right.
I mean, there's lots of other factors that come in. And I think that's actually one of the things, I think, that it goes back to calling it the choice city planner, is you only have so much time. And so if you have other things, like there were goals that I wanted to work on, and it took me 2 or 3 years before I could move, even though it was a huge priority, there were things that I had to do that were my responsibilities that I could not put away to actually get to some of the, like one of the examples is that I realized over time, I'm in my 40s now, and I was starting to put on a little weight. And I realized this is something that I definitely did not want to have that continue to progress the way it was going. But I had so many things going on that I could not put it, like I would put it on the top 3, but I just couldn't figure out how to make progress on that. And so I finally decided, after it had been on my top 3 goals for over a year and I hadn't made any progress, I decided it was time to hire a coach.
Okay.
And so I wanted to have a local coach that I could meet with in person. So I looked up like 5 different examples and I interviewed them all. And I picked the one that I thought would give me have the best, that I felt the most comfortable with, and that I felt like would give me the best results.
So that extra accountability pushed you over the line.
Yeah. And so this, in the last 6 months, I was able we had a weekly meeting for the first 4 months, and I was able to basically really put that into the top priority, and was able to make progress and lose over 10 pounds in the last 6 months.
Nice. The value of a coach.
The value of a coach.
Yeah. So, Jolly, we've highlighted that making time for reflection, evaluation, intentional planning is important, perhaps essential, to actually moving forward with goals. I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear you speak to how you've seen each of these disciplines be a vital part of the process, and how your resource specifically provides space for each of those aspects.
Great. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight that was really helpful for me is I would have different tasks and things that I wanted to accomplish. But I had trouble because I would sometimes think like there were some things that I needed to do every day. But there's a lot of things that you actually don't need to do every day.
Sure.
You really need to do them like twice a week or maybe 3 times a week. And there's some things that you don't need to do once a day or 2 or 3 times a week. You need to do it once a week or maybe even once a month. But I would lose track of a lot of the things that I needed to do once a month or once a quarter. I would lose track of all those things because I had so many things going on that it was hard for me to remember, oh my gosh, it's been 3 months and I haven't done that for 3 months, and I should have done it I should have done it last week or whatever. And so I actually put together, as part of just trying to understand how to keep track of that myself, what I call a life-giving routines exercise. And so this actually helps you, it's part of the planner, and it helps you to basically come through and check which exercises or which routines that you want and how often you need to do them, so that you can actually keep track of, okay, those really hard things to do that you're supposed to do once a month, that you can't ever remember that you're supposed to do it until 4 months have gone by. That really made a huge difference to help me think through and track some of those things, to become more intentional about making progress on things that you don't have to address all that often.
Well, yeah. And I think actually the other function, as I was doing the life-giving routines exercise, the other function it provides is that sometimes you can feel less overwhelmed by giving something a container, right? You never do it because it's just kind of all floating out there. But once you kind of identify, oh, that's an every week thing. I don't have to fret about it for the other 6 days, right? It's just once a week or something. So I feel like it was helpful for me to give things a container and kind of box them in so that they weren't just this nebulous, like, I need to do it at some point. But
yeah,
I
can see that.
That made a big difference, I think, especially when I was younger. My family didn't grow up budgeting or tracking their expenses or anything like that. And so I didn't really do that for the most part in my young adult life. But actually, when I took time off, I was like, all right, I've got time. It's time to finally start tracking my finances.
No more excuses.
No more excuses. So we use a software called Quicken to do that. And I think I had the same issue that you, like, at first I was like, okay, I haven't done it in like 3 days. I think I need to like track it again and download all the, the expenses or the categories or whatever else. So I think that was an example that was really helpful to say, that's a once a week exercise, not a once every 2 days or once every, 4 days or once a month. Because it definitely happened where I wouldn't do it for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then it was overwhelming to try to attack all at once. So I think that's really helpful to kind of experiment with different routines that you have in different areas that you manage in your life, and actually experiment what pattern you need to put them into. Like if it's a once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks category, to help you to think through that, so you don't do it too often and get too frantic about like doing it every, too often, but also like don't let it go too long where it's overwhelming to address.
Right. Well, and, because the life-giving routines is kind of like a open page spread, you can visualize all these routines in one space, but in their own categories. So like if you're, in fundraising, trying to look at how to steward the coming week, at a quick glance, you can see, oh, these are the things that need to happen this week. This is something I don't even need to think about. And it really helps you plan your time well, because you know at a glance how much you're trying to get into that time as a baseline. So
that's a great question. And maybe it's hard for people to visualize this without having the planner in front of them. But I would say I coach a lot of people who are either working full-time or are full-time students. And so they really do have a hard time, like, how am I actually going to squeeze fundraising in on top of all the other plates that are already spinning? So is there some general advice that you might give them for like where to start in trying to like pry into the crevices of their schedules?
Yeah, sure. I think a big thing is actually looking at your week. And so one of the things that I decided to do in the planner, I looked at quite a few different planners have a weekly preview. So that means you actually spend some time, usually either on Sunday or Sunday during the day, which is usually when I do it, or you could do it Monday morning, first thing. My schedule usually doesn't allow that because I have to go to work first thing Monday morning. So I spend time on Sunday doing that.
How long does that take you?
It varies depending on the week, but I keep a calendar. So I kind of look through my calendar, and then I basically look through and think about for the week, what are the different big things that I want to accomplish and which days could I put them in? And I actually assign which days I'm going to try to work on those different things.
Yeah.
So kind of one of the things that there is on the weekly preview, there is a task brainstorm. So you can brainstorm all the tasks that you need to accomplish that week. And then right next to that, there's a list of all the days of the week so that you can actually put those tasks, assign them to a certain day or different things like that.
Cool. Yeah, most people, even a student, would have a pretty good idea of what's taking up the majority of their time with a class schedule or extracurriculars already. So the big rocks are already in place.
The big rocks are already in place. And so then you have to figure out where you can put in the different things. And I think one thing that's really one way that I've changed over time is, I think this would really apply to fundraising, is there are probably some best practices of things that you should do day in and day out. And so maybe you don't need to do certain things every day, but there are probably things that you should do every single day.
Yeah.
You should contact somebody, or there would be an action step.
Yeah.
And you would say, every day except for Sunday, I'm going to do this. Or maybe every day I'm going to do this certain action. And then there's maybe like, okay, one day a week, I'm going to spend 4 hours working on my newsletter, or I'm going to spend this amount of time, and block off to where you actually say, okay, this is my time, and I'm actually going to focus and prioritize on Wednesday afternoon at 4:00, or maybe if you're a morning person, like I'm going to block off that whole morning, and that's what I'm going to take. That's what I'm going to attack that day. I think that's really valuable to think through your week, because it's not over. I think it's sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I've got all this stuff to do, and I don't know when I'm going to put it all in. But if you look at it a week ahead of time, you're like, oh, well, Thursday is not that busy at this time. And so a lot of times we can add in those things and kind of work that as a puzzle to figure out where we're going to put those different things that we should be doing on a regular basis, or that we need to do on a regular basis to help us accomplish the things that we're trying to take care of.
And it feels like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it feels like the uncertainty of how long something could take often prevents me from doing it. I don't know how this could take a long time to do it, but if I know that I only have a specific amount of time that it's only going to take, I'm going to have a beginning and an ending, that feels a little less intimidating, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say for Sundays, like an hour, just to give people an idea? Like,
I think you could spend however much time you want to give to it. So the other thing that I do, honestly, before I do the weekly preview, I spend some time doing the weekly review.
Okay.
And this is probably, honestly, my favorite part of the planner. So one of the things that I learned is, we were talking about this, that I felt like in a lot of ways that I was out of touch with myself. It was hard for me to actually even figure out what goals I wanted to set. And a lot of times, like, I would have several months go by, or different things that would happen, and I wouldn't even know, like, what's happened in the last 4 months. Like, I know there's been a lot of good, and there's been some things that were challenges and kind of overwhelming, and but I don't even know where I am or what happened, And so this was actually one of the most grounding exercises that has been the most life-giving to me, which is every day I try to write down 3 highlights of the day. So this was part of the coaching training. And what they would do is, after the coaching conversation that you would have in the training, that they would have you ask the question, what were your highlights of this conversation? And actually in the training, they said many times they'll actually say a highlight that you never talked about, but that they were thinking about. And I was really kind of like surprised by that, but I found it to be true. Almost every time they would say what their highlights were, they would say, well, we actually didn't talk about this, but one of the things that I was thinking was, and then they would say something that they had been thinking about in the background.
Trigger something else.
That was their big highlight and takeaway.
Yeah.
So that was actually, I did a lot of work with trying to think through, like, you hear a lot of people talk about the importance of gratitude and, different things like that. So I would try to write down oh, I'm thankful for, that I have a house and we have a heater and a bathroom, and, write down different things that you're thankful for that are kind of right in front of you all the time.
The garage this morning.
Yeah. Right.
All that wind.
That you didn't have,
so cold.
Yep. Didn't have ice on your windshield.
Yep. Oh, man.
But so this was a big thing for me is I just kind of ran out of things to be thankful for. But the way I solved this problem is writing down highlights from your day. And so actually, instead of trying to think through like generic things that you're thankful for, what highlights of your day is the surprises. What came up? Oh my gosh, I got to have this little like window of 30 minutes with my wife, and we got to go on a walk and we talked to the neighbors. And this was what our conversation was about. Or I was sitting in my office working on something, and my son came in and he had something at school that he wanted to talk about. And he gave me a big hug and said, like, it was so nice to talk to you about it. Or, that I got to take my daughter on a date, or, or that this patient wrote a really good review. And they said like, wow, I had been, to so many dentists, and, I had this experience with Dr. Jolly. And after like 20 years of having terrible experiences at the dentist, like this was actually really easy, and I'm not terrified to go to the dentist anymore. So, I mean, basically, these are the surprises throughout your day where you could say they're like little God moments, or they're just ways that you feel where you're like, wow, it was really cool to have that experience today. So what I started doing is I don't do it every day, but I try every day to write down at least 3 highlights of the day that were moments where something magical happened, or just a moment that I really wanted to cherish or be able to keep. Because what I found is if I don't write those down, after a few days, they're gone.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so then the second thing that happened is then I would go at the end of the week, the weekly review. You basically go back through your whole week and write down in different categories. So the categories that I use are in your relationships, in your work capacities, and then also in personal or self-care. What were the highlights from this week in those 3 areas?
Gotcha.
And oh my gosh, that actually is a total game changer, because if you even just tracking those things. So I just did a year review, and I have all the things that happened.
Oh, wow.
I have all my highlights from the whole year of the different little moments that happened. And so going back through that, you're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that we did this, or this like thing happened last May, and it was a total God moment, or something that happened that I totally had forgotten about it. But this actually enables you to track through some of those things and to be in touch with yourself about what's happening that's good in your life.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. I mean, remembering is really a great discipline for the people of God, right? And also, Andy, I wonder if it brought to mind for you our conversation with Barb and her encouragement to write down something every day at the end of the day for your writing and for communicating.
Right. Yep. Some overlap there.
Yeah. And so I feel like this resource, and so much of this resource is actually so phenomenal for your own formation. I mean, we haven't gotten into it, but there's so many elements of this planner that are really, I mean, you can tell it was designed by a coach. They're so transformational if you're able to use them.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But it's not only for your own formation and helping you have your stuff together, but it does equip you to communicate well, because then you know the things to tell people about,
And just to live in gratitude. I mean, don't we want that? Yeah.
Yeah, and remembrance.
It actually reminds me of living on the field. In our most recent tour, we were in a brand new place that was new for our company. And whenever you transition to a new country, it's challenging.
Yeah.
Right. You have the affective cycle, you have culture shock, you have all these things that you're trying to adjust to. But my team leader was fantastic. Both of them were fantastic about when we were together as a team, we'd be sitting down for dinner, and then inevitably we're just kind of munching away, and he would call out highlights, and we would each go around the table giving a highlight for that day, even if it was hard, even if like, man, we had trouble getting our visas or setting up our bank accounts or whatever it was. So that's what it reminded me of. It really fostered a spirit of, things are pretty good, actually.
Because that is true. It's really easy. I think as human beings, we are created in a lot of ways to be able to see what's wrong so that we can figure out what we need to work on. And so we're not really, I don't think we're really, we were really created to focus on what's going well because we don't need to work on that stuff. But it definitely makes a huge difference for your peace and contentment levels to regularly reflect on different moments where you had they were special. Like that you were like, wow, it was really worthwhile today to be alive because this little moment happened.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's really, really helpful to like even be able to look through, like go back from like 2 years ago and like I can look through all my highlights because I put them all in a certain place where I can look through them and quickly remember and be like, oh, that was so cool what happened in that moment. And so it's like a catalog of like what's happening in your life.
Yeah.
Which if you don't write them down, they're gone, you know? So I don't know. I'm kind of nostalgic about it now. I'm like, wow, this is so cool that I've started doing this because I'll have these records that I can look back through 15, 20 years from now. Cause that actually happened with me. My kids are a little bit older now. My oldest son's 15.
Okay.
And then we have 13, 11, and 7.
Okay.
And so, but a lot of those, I remember people would tell me, oh my gosh, you have to write that down. That was so funny. And I'm like, they do weird, funny stuff like that all the time. I'm always, like they have a jillion things. But I think it is really valuable to actually write write some of those down. And I have I have a reason now in a more structured way where I actually like can take in those moments, I think.
Yeah, that's very cool. This actually reminds me of a conversation we were having just earlier this week with the Nichols, Heather. We talked about like that idea of raising your Ebenezer, like that's biblical of when you cross, when they crossed the Jordan and the Lord dried it up, he said, build a monument.
Yeah.
I want you to remember. And so this is kind of the same thing, but on a more detailed scale. So you can capture all those little things. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that we've been able to give people so much insight into what the planner has. And guys, it really has so many useful tools. I mean, I've just kind of opened it to one of the daily spreads. And something else that's been really helpful for me is on each day of the week, there's a section called the Circle of a Thriving Life. And it allows you to, at a glance, kind of evaluate how each area is going. So as he mentioned, there's relationships, self-care, work management. And it just has these different categories within that I think, again, helps you have a quick visual for like, how is this going? And it's kind of designed to let you like rate yourself or maybe evaluate how you think that's going.
The best way, it's kind of designed as like a little target. And I actually, when I like have like a deposit in that area, I'll actually put like a little plus in that area. So I can kind of visually look and see like, okay, in this day, I made all these pluses in my work management area. Or in this day, I had like a lot of pluses or deposits in my family or relationships or friendships or different things like that. So that actually, I kind of can flip through my week and then just have like a visual glance at where have I actually made some deposits in which different areas or different things like that. So it helps me to be more intentional and have like a more visual way to look at kind of what I'm doing in the week.
Kind of like you're filling up different buckets.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think, as Andy and I have talked about like usefulness for this resource in fundraising, I really think you could, if you wanted, use it kind of solely in your fundraising goals. I wonder if it might be more helpful if you used it more holistically and incorporated fundraising into that, understanding it is one of your top 3 things right now. Depending on the season of fundraising that you're in. But Jolly has very generously said that we can put his information in the show notes so that if you wanted to try it out or kind of see what this looks like, then you could reach out to him.
Yeah. So if they'll email me, I'll give you the email and we'll put it in the email or in the show notes. And I can email them some of the different exercises that are in the planner. I'll put a PDF in there that I can respond to them with so that they can see kind of like a lot of times Amazon does like a look inside where you can kind of see parts of the book or something like that. So I'd be happy to send that to your listeners. And if they'll email me, I'd be happy to respond with some of that information for them.
Yeah, thank you. That is really great. And I really would encourage you guys. I mean, it is available on Amazon, and actually there's a version that's less than $10. And so really you can't go wrong giving it a try. So, yeah, thank you again for that, Jolly.
Yeah, this is really fun. So I am a big fan of Proverbs. And kind of when I designed the planner, I at first decided I wanted it to be a generic planner just for anybody who wants to use it. But I am kind of a Proverbs geek, and I really enjoy Proverbs a lot. So I actually spent this last quarter, one of my top 3 was to come up with over 100 of my favorite verses from Proverbs and categorize them. So there is 13 categories of verses from Proverbs that are listed on the daily pages. So you get, not only can you use this to plan your goals and track how things are going in different categories and your highlights and different things like that, but you also get a little inspiration from
Nice.
Proverbs each day.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's great.
It is.
So you've already talked about this a little bit, but let's give some space. Is there anything else you want to say about some of the benefits that you've experienced as you've adopted these rhythms of reflecting, evaluating, intentionally planning?
I think in a lot of ways, as you grow up, or as I grew up, there comes a lot of responsibilities with raising a family and with work activities and with trying to keep your marriage strong and
Adulting.
Just adulting in general.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think for me, it just became overwhelming to try to think through and track all the different responsibilities or relationships or different areas that I needed to contribute to. And so it just really helped me to have more peace, to be able to realize I can't do everything, but I can do some things. And I can look at what I've been doing and see where I've been making deposits or where I've been, making progress in some areas. And I can see where I can have exercises or things that I do where I try to evaluate, like, where am I deficient? Because I think that was my propensity, is there were certain areas that I was really strong at. Like, I loved tracking different, like with finances, I really liked tracking different things and seeing how I was growing. But then there would be some other ways that I was letting fall through the cracks. And so, but you can't do that. You can't just let those areas that you don't prefer them and just kind of like sweep them off in the corner and hope they won't ever get worse, because they will. And so I think it really has helped me to just be able to look at the whole picture of what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to progress, and be able to say, well, in this quarter, I'm going to sweep that thing over there and let it sit there for a while, because I'm going to make progress in these other areas. Or it's actually, I've had that one over in the corner, swept it over there for the last, 3 or 4 quarters. And it's time to get it out and dust it off and start working on it again. But it helps you to be more mindful about those things instead of just having it all. I feel like for a while I just had like sticky notes and like little scraps of paper of things to do and stuff all over the place. And it just really helps you to like, I think, just to like have more peace and like contentment to like be able to take all those things and be more mindful about them. And I think that's really what God wants for us. Like, I think He wants us to have more peace and contentment. And so I found that found that in today's world, I found that pretty challenging to do. There's so many responsibilities, and you get distracted by all these different things. And it was really hard for me to not be overwhelmed sometimes.
Yeah. Because when you're overwhelmed, maybe not everybody, but a lot of us will just kind of freeze and do nothing.
Or, kind of like strive and overperform, but to the detriment of some core areas that you just can't neglect, like your health or your time with people.
Or just do what's immediately in front of you because you're getting something done.
Right.
While neglecting the most important things.
Right.
I found that I tend to polarize, because you want to just work on what you're good at working on, but then you lose track of the other areas. And so it's hard to, if you don't look at the whole picture, it's really easy to polarize and do what you've always done well.
Sure.
But then not take care of some of those things.
You're confident in those things.
Yeah, you're good at them. And so it feels good to work on them, even if you're not balanced.
Right.
So
Well, Andy, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm curious.
snap.
I know that you're not a planner guy, but what from this conversation has piqued your interest, or have you thought, ooh, I would find that helpful?
I resonate with the idea of just identifying all the different things that need to be done, because sometimes it feels nebulous and that can feel overwhelming. And so I'll tackle something in front of me that feels like it's important, but there's a lot of other stuff that needs to get done as well. So yeah, I like the idea. I think knowledge helps. Knowledge is power.
And containing, giving containment. That's helpful too.
Yeah, yeah.
I did want to mention that one other thing I really love about the planner is because it's not dated. It is designed to be used for a full quarter, but it doesn't have any dates, and you write in the dates yourself. And actually, for a person like me, that is really helpful because it means that if you go on vacation one week and for some reason you don't use your planner, when you come back to it, you don't have like 6 days that you didn't use because they were dated and now you
feel guilty about it.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So I like that it's very versatile in that way.
Yeah.
Very forgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, you have been so generous with your time, and we definitely want to respect that. I think just a couple more things. So the very first page highlights 5 priorities: choose a life that I love, progress written goals, balance my life with routines, spend time with people who bring out the best in me, and thrive where it matters most. How have you seen these priorities take root in your own life or in the lives of others through focusing on these disciplines?
Honestly, I've done things before where I just write things that I want to live by. And so I honestly, as I was doing this planner, I kind of needed something for the front page. And I wanted it to be not necessarily like over Christian speak. I wanted it to be just normal vernacular.
Accessible.
Normal, accessible vernacular. And so, because I'm a real person, like I am a follower of Jesus, I'm a Christian, but I also am a real person. And so I wanted to think like, I didn't want too many things because your brain can't really handle that if you have a list of 25 things. But I just kind of thought, what is it that I want to live by this quarter? And so actually over time, I've been working on this and doing edits and different versions of this planner for about 5 years now. And over time, I experimented with those 5 things. One of the last things that I entered in was to spend time with people who bring out the best in me. And there's a proverb that says, he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. And so, and I've lived by that. I think there were some people that I thought were wise that I was around a lot. And it turned out that they weren't exactly who I thought they were. And there are people that at first glance, I didn't think like that they were somebody that I might want to be around, but I actually learned a great deal from some of those people. And so I think I've kind of become more prayerful about that over time, that I think through like, who are the people that bring out the best in me? And so, because there are people that I'm around that I enjoy.
That refine you too.
That they could refine you, but you don't really like, sometimes I feel like you don't really enjoy being around those people or that you don't want to be around them because they're they chip off some of the rough edges and you're like, ow, I don't really want to be around that person and get that they're too abrasive or different things like that. But I'll also ask my wife about that and say like, do you think that this person's good for me to be around? Like, I think that's a really helpful thing to ask those around you that care about you.
Do they edify? Do they point you back to Christ? Do they make you a better person? Is that where you're going with that?
I think so. Yeah. And also, like, am I a better person when I'm around them or different things? Right. I think that's a heart of humility to ask those around you that care about you, like, who do you think I should be around? Or should I be more intentional about developing some of these relationships? Or are there some relationships that I really like and I usually prioritize them, but maybe I should take a few steps back. So I think that's that's probably one of the last things that I added in. But I think that the value of our relationships and connections is really, really important. And to spend time, I guess for me, to think through that, who does bring out the best in me that I want to invest my life in, and that I want them to, like, I want to be around them so that they rub off on me, and that I become a better person over time, walking with them and doing life with them.
And the sooner you learn that, the better, I feel like, right? So if you're a young listener, like, pay attention.
Yeah. And even if you're in a context where you kind of think, man, I don't really have much agency over the people that I spend time with, right? Like my team is my team, or the people I work with in ministry are my people, or my family is my family, or whatever. But I think if you really like thought about it and maybe sought the Lord with it, I feel like he would bring to mind, even within that, the people of peace for you.
And that's a balance, right? Like, you don't want to abandon people who grade you the wrong way because of, maybe they're unbelievers, right? Like, there's ministry to be balanced out there too. But you're right. Like, let's get back to that scripture.
Yeah.
Right. Proverbs.
I think I thought about that over time, because I feel like sometimes you get nervous about spending time with people that you are afraid they're going to rub off on you in the wrong way. Or sometimes you really want to hang out with somebody, but they don't, or that you want to spend more time with somebody, but they don't really edify you the way that you're hoping. And you can also, I think one of the things that, this was actually a really cool story. This year, I met back up with the first guy that discipled or mentored me. That was, I guess he probably wasn't the first guy that did it, but it was the first one that I really felt like I was, as an adult, that I was like mentored by an older, like a Christian mentor that had a value for discipleship and mentoring. And I hadn't seen him in quite a few years, and just felt I was actually looking at spend time with people who bring out the best in me. And I was like, Brad definitely brings out the best in me. And my connection with him was such a life-giving, like, season in my life and stuff like that. So I reached back out to him, and he was willing to meet back up with me again. And one of the coolest things happened. I knew this would be the case, but I asked Brad, was there somebody who was the first person that mentored you? Because you only learn to do that by when somebody else pours into your own life.
It's been modeled for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so he said, yeah, of course there is. And I said, oh my gosh, is he still alive? Is he still walking with the Lord? Like, how's that all going, or whatever else? And he said, oh yeah, of course he is. And I said, are you still in touch with him? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, where is he? Like, tell me the story. Like, how did you guys meet, or what happened, and stuff like that. And so he said, oh yeah, his name's Don, and he lives down in Colorado Springs. And I was like, could we go meet him? And
that's
so
fun.
we actually got to, he contacted him and set it up, and we actually spent the day and drove down to Colorado Springs.
Very cool.
And it, so I think we actually have more control over, I think if there with some intentionality, you can actually create moments where you are able to spend time with people who bring out the best in you. Like, I didn't even know Don, but that was like one of the coolest experiences in my life, to go down, and we sat at a Chick-fil-A for 3 hours.
The Lord's chicken.
And he told me all the stories, and Brad asked him about a bunch of questions when they first met, and was like, I remember doing this, but what happened there? And it was just such a cool experience. And so I think, sometimes I do feel like we don't have agency, like we want to be friends with somebody or spend more time with somebody, and we don't necessarily know how to do that. But I think with a little bit, I think you can ask for God's help with that. I think that's a prayer that God will honor, is if you want to grow and learn how to have more wisdom and be around people who will rub off on you and will influence you for the better. I think that's a prayer God is happy to answer.
And Lord, help me to rub off in the same way on other people.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Help me to be a good influence in their life. But help me to also please surround me and bring into my life.
Yeah. Some intake and some outflow. Yeah.
Well, and as you were talking, I couldn't help but think about how for our listeners and for people that find themselves in support-based work, I mean, they might not be directly physically present with them, but certainly the people that are partnering with you are the kind of people that bring out the best in you, right? Or hopefully those are relationships that are truly beneficial and mutually encouraging. And, just as you were talking about the longevity of the relationship with Brad, as you were talking about the relationship with Brad and then his relationship with Don and then how it all came together, it brought to mind a conversation Andy and I had recently with the Nichols, who have had some of the same partners for over 30 years and how fondly they talked about them. And so it's just really cool to think about the different ways that God surrounds us with wise people and equips us through them and allows us to be an encouragement in their lives as well.
Yeah.
So that's
And
cool.
as you're pouring yourself into your ministry, into the people around you and really focus, like don't neglect filling yourself up with those people that will recharge you and encourage you and bless you.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. We only have one more question, and Andy, I'll let you ask it.
All right. Okay. So, hypothetical situation. You have $10,000. For some reason, you have to give it away today. You have 5 seconds to decide who or what do you give it to? And it can't be the Provisio Ministries.
I think that's an easy answer for me. So Brad was part of the Navigator Ministries.
Nice.
And so that was such a huge influence in my life when I was in my early 20s to be mentored and discipled. And so I think, given to ministry, either the Navigators or ministry like that really focuses on mentorship and discipleship is where I would go.
It's clearly had an impact.
It has.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as we said, we will give some information on how to contact Jolly or his resources in our show notes. Obviously he has the planner, which we've been talking about. He does also have a book on Proverbs that we can put in the show notes. And I guess in closing, Jolly, any other resources you would want to point people to?
I think this hopefully is a no-brainer. I think the ability to, even if all you would do is take 5 minutes at the end of your night and write down 3 highlights of your day and have a specific, the planner is less than $10 on Amazon for the paperback version. And then there's also a hardback version that you can buy for around $16.
For the price of 2 lattes.
There you go. And so even if you would just take that one practice of writing down your highlights of your day, and I honestly would encourage you to start pretty small. Think through when you first do this, really pick 1 or 2, maybe 3 things each day that you want to use the planner for. Don't try to do all of it at once. It's there so it can be a versatile resource so that you can do more with it if you want. But really what I would suggest is do the dissonance exercise, figure out 1, 2, or 3 goals that you want to make progress on this quarter, and write down your highlights of the day. And if you do those things, it will make a significant impact in your ability to progress something that's important to you. And it'll also, I think, make a huge sense of progress in your peace and contentment and seeing what God's been doing in your life over the last weeks and months and years, depending on how often you're writing those things down.
Baby steps.
I think
Start
it's baby
small.
steps.
Yep,
it is for sure. So this has been so fun. I'm really honored to spend this time with you guys today, and it's really fun to have the opportunity to talk to your listeners about this resource.
Yeah.
I think it's been something that's been super helpful for me, and it's just fun to be able to bless, hopefully, the listeners of your podcast with this resource at a very affordable price. But I think it'll really make a big difference if they're inclined to move forward. To
just dip their toes in.
Just dip their toes in.
Yep.
It's pretty low risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe even Andy will give it a try. So
I think I might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Thank you so much for your time. And for our listeners, look for all the information in the show notes, and we'll catch you next time.
It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.